If you're a senior architect who's deep in a GCP migration, you already know the truth. The real headache, the real bottleneck, it's not compute, it's not storage. It's that tangled mess of integrations. So today, we're not talking basics. We're going deep on the one thing that will absolutely make or break your modernization effort, your integration strategy. Let's just put it out there right at the start. Your current integrations are the invisible anchors dragging your entire organization down. You feel it every single time a simple business request turns into a 6-month archaeological dig through brittle point-to-point connections. That's the drag we are here to cut loose. And this slide? It just lays it all out, doesn't it? On the left, that's the old world. You know, the nightly file drops, services just reaching right into each other's databases, a brittle, tightly coupled mess. On the right is where we've got to be. Managed APIs, asynchronous events, and decoupled systems that are built for cloud speed. This is the journey from left to right that we're going to map out. So here's our roadmap. First, we'll really diagnose the legacy trap so we all know exactly what we're up against. Then we'll jump into the two-part solution, the API-first revolution and event-driven design. Now, most importantly, we are going to map out a practical step-by-step migration path. No big bangs here. And we'll wrap up with the key patterns to make sure what you build today is actually still relevant tomorrow. All right, so let's start by taking a closer look at that legacy integration trap. Because if you want to escape it, you first have to understand why its walls are so high to begin with. You know, I always think of these point-to-point connections as a tangled ball of old Christmas lights. When one little bulb goes out, good luck finding it. This brittleness means your maintenance budget is always through the roof, and every new feature you try to build risks breaking 10 old ones. It's slow, it doesn't scale, and it locks your most valuable data away in these isolated silos. So how do we start untangling those lights? Well, it all begins with a fundamental shift in how we think about services connecting in the first place. And that brings us to the API-first revolution. And this right here is the crucial mind shift. With an API-first approach, the API isn't some afterthought you tack on at the end. No way. The API is the product. You design the contract, the non-negotiable rules of how your service will behave, before you write a single line of code. That contract becomes the one source of truth for everybody. And this is how it actually works in practice. Step 1, you design that contract, maybe using a standard like OpenAPI. Step 2, you publish that contract to a managed platform, like Google's API Gateway. This creates a stable, secure front door. And only then, as a totally separate step that can happen in parallel, do you build the back-end service that actually delivers on the promises made in that contract. So why should you, as an architect, really care about this? Well, the payoffs are huge. You get consistency across your entire ecosystem, which is a massive win. You create a discoverable catalog of every business capability you have. You centralize security instead of reinventing the wheel for every single service. And here's the real game changer. You unlock parallel development. Once that contract is published, your front end, your mobile, and your back end teams can all build against it at the same time. Think about how much that slashes your time to market. Okay, so APIs are perfect for that synchronous request-response kind of interaction. But what about when something happens in one part of the system and other parts need to react, but without constantly asking, hey, did it happen yet? Did it happen yet? This brings us to the next level of decoupling, event-driven design. In an event-driven architecture, or EDA, services communicate by basically producing and consuming events. And an event is just a signal that something meaningful happened. An order was placed, a customer profile was updated, you name it. Services just broadcast these events without knowing or even caring who might be listening. This is the ultimate form of decoupling. This slide draws the contrast perfectly. The API model on the left, that's a pull model. It's like a phone call. The client calls the server and is temporally coupled. It's stuck on the line, waiting for a direct response. The event model on the right, that's a push model. Think of it like a news broadcast. A service publishes an event and immediately moves on. It's fire and forget. Other services can then subscribe to the events they care about, whenever they care about them. It's just the ideal pattern for reacting to state changes across your entire system. And on Google Cloud, your toolkit for this is super clear. You're going to use PubSub as that massively scalable, super reliable messaging backbone to carry all your events. And then use EventArc as the universal trigger. It's basically the glue that connects those events to services like Cloud Run or Cloud Functions, without you having to write any of that boilerplate plumbing code yourself. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This all sounds great on a slide, right? But you have a running system. You have a business to run. You can't just turn everything off. This brings us to probably the most critical part of this whole thing, your incremental migration path. And this is how you do it safely. In phase 1, nothing changes, business as usual. But in phase 2, this is where the magic happens. You introduce that API facade we talked about earlier. This becomes the new front door for everything. It can route traffic to either the old system or a new service you're building behind the scenes. They coexist. You can test, validate, and slowly shift traffic over at your own pace. Then, only when you are 100% confident do you move to phase 3 and finally decommission the old system. It's a controlled evolution, not a risky revolution.
All right, finally, let's talk about how to build in a way that avoids creating the next generation's legacy system, right? How do we make sure this new architecture is resilient and adaptable for years to come? This brings us to our last section, key patterns for future-proofing. These are 3 patterns that every single cloud architect should have in their back pocket. The Stringler fig is that overall strategy we just talked about. You slowly grow the new system around the old one. The anti-corruption layer, that's your tactical translator. It's a dedicated service that sits between new and old systems, and it prevents those old legacy data models from polluting your clean new services. And the API facade is your entry point, that simple, non-invasive first step to give the world a modern interface, even if the backend is still humming along on the old stuff.
So I'll leave you with this question to take back to your teams. Look at your architecture diagrams. Look at the way data actually flows through your organization. Is it fundamentally built for the past, with all its brittle connections and slow pace? Or are you actively building a decoupled, resilient foundation that's actually ready for the future? The choice, and now the patterns to get there, are all yours.